Hi, everyone.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Ben. I'm with a Business Insider. And with me is Juergen and Patrice. We just had a session where we talked about stress. So I want to open it up by talking about a broader stress in terms of the macro situation that most companies are dealing with right now. And I guess my question for Patrice or Juergen is, what keeps you up at night right now, given all the uncertainty in the global economy, politically and otherwise?
You want to start, or should I?
I can start because I had exactly the same question, let's say 10 days ago, from my CEO, and I say it's just about cybersecurity. So yeah.
In what sense?
Because so I'm the CIO of Suez. Suez have been created 160 years ago. We dig the canal of Suez. So we have a long history, a bunch of legacy system. Mm-hmm. And I need now to corral all those initiatives to be sure that we keep the pace up to be sure that we can compete against the big player like Veolia and the other guys.
Juergen?
Yeah, for me, you're a very educated audience here. But one thing I would pick is the geopolitical situation. So I'm very convinced that the Huawei situation, for example, it's like a Sputnik moment for China. So if you think about global IT, mm-hmm. I think that is the moment that will maybe not this year and not next year, but over a period of 10 years, it will significantly impact the IT landscape because China will get more Chinese IT mm-hmm. companies. They will rise more, do more themselves, have sovereignty in that. And that will be interesting, but also it's a challenge. So for all companies based in the US, and enjoy that you have one very large market. It is a huge advantage. Also, if you go to Europe, I think that's still quite easy to do business. Mm-hmm. But also as IT companies, if you now go more and more to China, but also then other countries in the region or even Middle East or even India, like more and more protectionism comes up. More and more regulation comes up regarding data privacy, not moving data, but also regarding IP, where's IP coming from? And just the Huawei situation, that it came up, brings like so many new questions for companies. Mm-hmm. So how am I secure if the US or others do this or do that? So this, I think, sparks completely new discussions and above and beyond everything we already know regarding global trends in IT. I think this will be a very shaking and moving moment.
Of course, when you talk about the Sputnik moment, that's when the U.S., in reaction to Sputnik, the Soviet Union's advantage back in the 1950s or 1960s, sparked innovation in the U.S. and led the U.S. or helped the U.S. Take the lead. And one trend that, of course, we're looking at is it's about the second decade now, is the rise of the cloud. Mm-hmm. And one thing I want to ask you is, as I said, it's entering our second decade. It started maybe in the early 2000s. What are some of the things? What are the trends that you feel are the most significant since it's been 10 years? And what are the trends now that have been overhyped that you think CIOs and companies should not worry about?
Yeah. Patrice, you want to start again?
Yeah. Well, at the end of the 2000, I remember discussion at the board level saying that if you have strategic system, if you have very sensitive data, you have to keep them on premise in the basement. Now it's completely the opposite. We changed completely the model. If you have sensitive data, if you have critical system, usually you feel that you're more secure in the cloud mm-hmm. because you consider that cyber security are more or less a given when you move to the cloud. So that was a big switch for me.
Despite the worries that in the cloud you'll be having your data, as one analyst said, your data will be swimming in the systems of other, or even of your competitors.
Yeah, but a few years ago, most of the people thought that if you can locate your data in a basement, you're safe.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
That is no
everybody
longer
understands
the case.
that it's not true. So I think that's a big switch here.
Yeah, if you're a very young company, then probably it's a lot easier. So you can go all in cloud and reap all the benefits there, and you cannot even imagine the on-premise world. But of course, many large companies, older than 10 years, have on-premise systems. And here we surveyed, like 3 years back, I would say, 2.5 years back, surveyed our customer base. And there it was like 1/4 would say we will never go to the cloud. 50% said some non-critical systems, travel and expense, something like that, will go to the cloud. The rest stays on-prem. And only 25% said, yes, we will go all in cloud. Now, like 9 months back, we did the same survey again. And now it was basically 75% saying all cloud, and 25% saying we keep systems locally, or we cannot go because of regulatory reasons. And what we see in reality is that even also those 75%, they have such modified systems. And these are very sophisticated systems, not only SAP, SAP, but many others as well. Very customized. And in the cloud, you can only modify and customize so much. So such that what we see happening is that they look at the end-to-end processes, and certain processes where it's non-differentiating, they move to the cloud. That's why I was like, what is so differentiating in recruiting, for example? Not too much. Financials are anyway there's regulatory boundary conditions. So moving those to the cloud quite quickly. And then the core assets, depending on what company you are, like manufacturing or marketing or whatever your core asset is, it's hard for you to do that in a standard system, because usually cloud systems are much less modifiable. So therefore, those are either being kept on-premise for now, because also hundreds of millions or billions of dollars went into it, or they try to build this on hyperscalers.
For Patrice, since given that you have a 150-year-old company, what was the key element that made it easier for you to make the decision to move? And maybe just to clarify, you don't have all your systems in the cloud, right? You're actually a multi-cloud system.
We had probably more than 40 data centers across the world, and we realized that it's just sustainable. You need to have large team to manage all those operations. So it was crystal clear that we have to move to the cloud to consolidate and to take benefits from the experience of the big vendors, the Azure, the AWS, and even Oracle. So.
You asked about mistakes.
Yes.
So I think one of the main mistakes is just going to the cloud for cost reasons. So some companies initially believe that, and the initial calculation also suggests that. But when you do that, then you also realize that actually the cost structure is quite complex. If you look at your Google, AWS, Azure bill after you use that, you mentioned it financial operations people to make sure that actually you have your cost under control there as well. But because, for example, moving traffic out or data out is very expensive. So you can make easy mistakes, which quadruple your invoice, and I see some people nodding their head. So that is something, just moving there for cost reasons should not be the reason. What works well is, I think, moving there for speed of innovation. I think we still have some systems where we have a major upgrade every year, and then you can imagine that it takes time to adopt that. So the cycle time and lead time from, hey, the developer checked in some code to the first user uses it is very long. But also we do have cloud-native systems, like our analytics cloud system, where we released 243 times last year. And that is, of course, a huge difference. We can now have a conversation, and the regular updates every 2 weeks, but a lot happens in between. So it's very likely that if it's an important change, in latest 4 weeks, it's there. And that's a completely different conversation, which I think also cloud is driving, where it's more about customer success and outcomes. And yeah, that's, I think, also it's the main driver to the cloud.
Yeah.
What is...
Perhaps I can add that if you move only on the with the objective to reduce the costs, usually you manage your cloud infrastructure like you manage your data center, and at the end you've seen your cost going north. So yes, you really need to change the mindset, because it's so easy to set up environment. You don't switch off, the training system during the weekend, during the night, and at the end, yes, you can have a bill shock, and also you can have also some security issue, because it's so easy to set up systems. So sometimes you consider that the cybersecurity part is a given, which is not true. I mean, so.
But are the cost savings much more of a long-term advantage in your view? And what are some of the things you need to be mindful of? I mean, aside from the things that you already mentioned, to achieve that eventually.
A simple one is not using spot instances. No, but I think you need to be mindful, and also, for example, we are also in a transition from an on-premise company to a cloud company. In some areas, we acquired cloud companies, so we kept that DNA intact. Now the whole company is shifting in that direction. And sometimes, I give you one concrete example. We price ourselves out of the market in many situations, for example, with SAP HANA, because we offer the full thing, but we learn that others offer, for example, initially just a BigQuery to manage huge data volumes. And therefore, if you look at like cost comparison for a petabyte of an HANA-based system and a petabyte of a BigQuery-based system, you immediately say SAP is out. And then, but what then happens is that with the BigQuery system, that's not sufficient. And then you have to add layers and layers because your users are not happy with response times and so on and so on. And in the end, even you end up at a similar price. But there we need to be more intelligent, injecting ourselves better in these conversations, for example.
What have been, like in the last 3-5 years, have been the trends that became hot, but in your view became overhyped and not really useful?
You want to start? Should I? You look like I should start.
Yeah.
So we mentioned. I mean, the morning was great. I think I can only agree, and I have a certain view on blockchain. So that is quite slow. But also one thing was not mentioned, which was AR VR. So there, So if I had done this 3 years back, I would have rated AR VR higher. And I tested latest HoloLens and other devices, so I think that still needs quite a lot of time and like a few more cycles of now. I think military starts investing, gaming, and probably adult industry. So probably a few more $1 billion need to go into that before it's like for us users, it makes any difference in the workplace.
Yeah. I would say AI and machine learning.
As overhyped trends, or?
I mean, I think for some people there are some confusion between AI and machine learning, And you know, some of the people say, okay, that's the magic recipe. With this AI, I will resolve all my issue, even if I don't work on my legacy, if I'm not working on how to simplify my processes and so on. So there's some confusion, and I've seen after we did several proof of concept, and we've seen that in some area it's not that magic. Mm-hmm. So.
Are you able to cite maybe some examples from your company?
I mean, you know, we do water management, and typically we try to locate the leaks in the network thanks to AI and machine learning. So we did tremendous progress over the year, but you know, when you just define that I mean, we have a pipe burst during 20 meters, 30 meters, it's just not enough. I mean, you have to dig during 30 meters. So I think it's not the magic at this stage that we would expect. And it's not that easy too. I mean, you know, collect all the data and have enough data to be sure that the machine is able to learn. It's not that easy.
Yeah, so data, I think, is the most important part on machine learning, and we also saw a lot of restrictions there, and unrealistic expectations. I mean, such as like 98% accuracy in complex tasks. Humans are very good at doing complex tasks, so the expectation that you can completely eliminate humans' jobs is often unrealistic. And you can eliminate like certain parts. And here, that's what, for example, I saw earlier the presentation of the service automation startup. What was the name? Moreworks. Yeah. So that's the right approach, I would say. So start with realistic expectations. Yes, we can do so and so many use cases. A lot probably is also a rule-based system first, because you cannot just give data and then have unsupervised learning figured out. That doesn't work. And then piece after piece, you do more and more. So that is the right approach when it is about machine learning, and then having the right data sets in place is very important too.
But are these just early challenges, early hurdles? What is your own view of the future of AI in the cloud?
It will continue to evolve, and in the cloud, the advantage is that you have like you can consume it easily. But also, what we then saw, take image recognition from any vendor out from the shelf, so to say, it's not good enough. If you go to a steel producer and use any of the available off-the-shelf cloud image libraries to detect like bad quality in steel being produced, it's an illusion that this would just happen and would just be possible automatically. It's just not working. And therefore, you need like specialized companies, as we have that in many other verticals. You need to have specialized companies having a lot of data sets for certain use cases, and then it works.
You able to comment on, I mean, one trend that was big maybe 5 years ago was Hadoop and big data. And then AI emerged, and there's the view that it's been overshadowed by that and plus cloud data warehousing. What has been your experience?
Yeah, I mean, we clearly see all the Hadoop kind of companies fail. So I think, how many of you had a Hadoop project in your companies, and how many were like are super happy?
Super happy.
So that's happy. Yeah, so that's the answer. And one of the reasons, from my perspective, is we now try to make it simple. If someone asks us what is the value of data, we say it's the amount of data times quality of data times usage of data. And if this quality piece, for example, that's underrepresented very often. If like quality is 0, then your data value is 0. And very often we tend to just export data somewhere, but we lose the context, we lose the semantics, we lose integrity of data. and then it just doesn't work. You have a huge data lake or swamp, but you cannot do anything with it. So I think that are many, at least from what I heard and learned, many experiences of Hadoop projects. We try, and many companies try doing something in that area. We do it with like HANA for our, and I don't want to do advertisement, but it's the HANA data warehouse and then analytics cloud on top. And what I see, no, I stop here and give it to you, but then I have one area which I would like to also test with the audience, where I see a lot of movement, where there can be much more immediate value for companies compared to some more fluffy topics.
Okay.
But I give
yeah,
it to
I mean,
you,
I
Patrice.
fully agree, and you know, I consider that it's partially the fault of some, let's say, software vendor who try to sell that they have a magic recipe and they can clean the data, sort the data, and you will find the diamond in the swamp. It doesn't work like that, unfortunately. It's also, I think, partially our fault. I mean, the guys who buy and set up the solution to trust this kind of message. I mean, all the IT guys, you know, who went through the ERP implementation and so on. I mean, at the end of the day, the quality of the data are the key. I mean, if you want to really analyze your data and make clever decision, clever choice, it means that your data should be clean. So it means that you should put in place the data governance, the data catalog. You know, we are 90,000 people in the group. We do business in more than 100 countries. The definition of the turnover is not that simple. It depends on the way you calculate, if you take into account the intercompany flows and so on and so on. So you need to clean the data. I mean, yeah.
Go ahead, Juergen, you can say something on you.
Yeah, one area I see, and I tested for like the last 10 weeks or so, is talking to many customers about integrated planning. So we, for example, we do have separate planning solutions in place, like financial plan. Think about your financial plan, budgeting. But then, of course, that ties into your demand. So you want to have certain revenue expectations, ties into your demand planning. But that, of course, ties into your production, warehousing, manufacturing, workforce planning, sales planning. Then, for example, down to regional planning and like having your sales regions. And for example, what we do there is you could say, hey, this is the demand you think you will have in an area, and then what is the quota? So quota assignment for salespeople, and then using machine learning, for example, taking a city like San Francisco and say, hey, imagine you would put 4 sales reps into the city. How would you divide that? If you put 8, how would you divide that? If you do that for California, how would that look like with 20 or 50 people? For the USA, for Canada, for everything. So here I get 95%, if not more, I get the answer of, we do that very poorly. But if you think about the value you can get out of that you have the right, just the right planning in place, which is interconnected throughout the whole the value chain of a company. I think that is one of the things which seems to be underrated compared to other hype topics, and it could have immediate impact. I don't know how you see it.
My turn to take a poll. How many in this audience come from companies that are all in the cloud? And how many are not in the cloud at all, are all on-prem? None. I assume most are multi-cloud or hybrid cloud. Yes? And that's something maybe we can discuss, especially maybe for Patrice. What has been your experience in terms of making the balance? Because you have on-prem, and you're actually multi-cloud. You use AWS and Azure. Yeah. Can you discuss that journey and how you ended up with that kind of configuration?
You know, it starts with cost reduction objective, obsolescence, So it was more tactical move. And that basically was a mistake because I do consider that typically the skills of your team is a key if you would like to really be successful in this kind of journey. We talk about FinOps. If you don't take care about how the pricing, what is the model of pricing of those big vendors, I mean, at the end of the month, yes, your costs won't be reduced. The reliability of the operation is not a given. So I would say that, yes, probably the make mistake is at the beginning we follow the trends and we just forget that perhaps we didn't have enough skilled people to really to shape and to do a nice architecture journey too, because I mean, all the systems are interconnected. So some of them are in Azure, the other one are AWS, some of them are in the data center. So yeah, probably think more about what are the required skills to manage efficiently this kind of hybrid infrastructure.
And what worked well, you think? What would you share with other companies to follow, tips to follow?
I would say that I try to develop good partnership with key vendors, and that help a lot to learn fast. And you know, typically yesterday I was with the Sapphire team to exchange with the startup, and that's the way I think it works, because I mean, you get knowledge, you get experience from guys that basically solve the issue you have 6 months ago, 1 year ago. So I think that's something work well. I mean, and it's a huge discussion with the purchasing department, obviously, because you know those guys want really to treat the vendors as really a vendors, and I do consider that, especially in my area, that for the key vendors, we need to develop more partnership.
How many key vendors would you have? How many would you consider being key?
You know, in each area, software, it's probably less than 5. So my strategy is pretty clear. I mean, we're going to work and develop partnership with the big guys and have enough time and money to work with startup. So that's the way I would like to balance my vendor relationship.
Any other thoughts from Juergen, from your customers, in terms of that balance of, making the decision to go multi-cloud or hybrid cloud, or going all in?
Yeah, we do of course see more companies using multiple clouds and multiple solutions, and what you just have to look for and ask for is openness and integration capabilities. I think that's the most important part.
Patrice mentioned the process of finding vendors. The way the software market has evolved, it's changed dramatically, right, in the last 10 years. And increasingly, the role of smaller companies, startups, is becoming bigger. And maybe this is more for SAP and how you manage that transition. What are some of the changes that have been tough for you, given that you are more the old style, the old school tech software vendors? Now you have so many other smaller firms, some of them founded by companies that come from that come from SAP or Oracle or other tech giants.
In the end, almost every company now is becoming an IT company, which is good, but also, of course, gives a lot more variety. So therefore, openness is important, and an ecosystem is important. That's also why here we have Ram sitting here as well with SAP.io, where we invest in external startups, but also learn from that and mingle them, so to say, with internal startups within the company, and of course working closely together with Sapphire Ventures. And a lot is, we also as an industry have to take care that we take people with us, and that culture is one important point when implementing. And that also, to your question, means more openness and, again, having outcome in mind. So what's the best for the customer? And as long as you put the customer in the center, and then like as an SAP or as other vendors also say, hey, in many cases we will be able to help, but in other cases we are not, but we want to have the best startup or other partner working with you such that you are successful. And that, I think, is a mind shift change that is happening.
What is your biggest worry in the way the market is evolving?
Protection, I come back to the first point.
Okay.
Really protectionism that like we have huge challenges in Europe with Brexit going on, global challenges. So really, also for the IT market, the more regulation we have, we need free flow of data, we need like few regulations, we need a global world working together. I think that proved to be very important. And above and beyond all the smaller tactical things, that is something that worries me.
Patrice?
I would say the same, the regulation, when you have to do business, in China, in Europe, the GDPR story and all those stuff. I mean, that's some people say it's a constraint, but for GDPR, typically, when I take part of my brain as a CIO, I say, wow, I need to spend that amount of money to take into account the regulation. But then when I use my citizen brain, I say, that makes sense. So, but when you need to operate your global IT with local regulation and more constraints, that becomes a challenge for sure.
How has the role of the CIO, you think, changed in the last 10 years? And just maybe speaking from your experience and the experience of your clients. Yeah. What has been the biggest change?
The Gartner introduced the bimodal CIO or the bimodal IT. I think it's much more complex than that. Today I need to take care about the legacy system. I need to prepare the cloud and AI. I need to think about the future because, even if the cycle comes more and more shorter, you need to think where the company will go in 5 years from now. And I would add probably the HR or the talents war is already a key challenge.
Okay. And I also make it quick, such that we do not go too far over time. For me, it's challenge for CIOs is being a change agent because, many CIOs are challenged that the CIO is taking care that the IT machine is running, but then there's a chief digital officer or whatsoever taking care of all the innovation. So I think that is something where the CIO should be proud of the role, but also then expand more and more into a partnership with the LOB heads, the sales head and HR head, and so on and so on and so on. Otherwise, the risk is that it's really like the back end which needs to run. No one appreciates it. If something breaks, then you get hit. But it should be on a strategic level. I think many CIOs have that pathway, either that one or the other. So here, of course, we want to help the CIO role staying and being even more relevant in the future.
And on that note, thank you very much, Patrice and Juergen.
Ben,
and
thanks a lot.